All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining today. The purpose of this event is really to share information about how we do application development for mobile apps. This event in particular is really going to focus on businesses because we've seen a huge need for small businesses to have a mobile strategy. So with that in mind, I'm just going to go over kind of what we're going to cover today. So we will be talking about why you might need a mobile app. We're also going to talk about different types of apps and what kind of app your business might need. We'll be looking at some of the design considerations. I'm also going to use one of our examples, Celebrity Shuttle, as a case study to demonstrate kind of the approach and why it might work to have a mobile app. Then we're going to talk a little bit about, before you develop an app, things you might want to know.
And just so everybody knows that this being recorded. Sorry.
No, you're good. So why do you need a mobile application? You know, for years, many businesses have survived just using computer applications or websites or traditional methods like paper and phone calls. So why might you need a mobile application? Well, first of all, smartphones are continuing to grow in popularity. In a survey that was done last year, 85% of American respondents had smartphones. And because of this, it's really important for businesses to have a mobile strategy for websites and applications. Every year, the amount of apps being downloaded continues to rise significantly. This is in billions. So just between 2019 and 2020, we saw a 14 billion increase in the number of apps being downloaded. So here's a couple more statistics if you're not quite sold yet that you need a mobile approach. The Apple App Store has 1.96 million apps that are available for download. That is a lot. There are also 2.87 million apps available for download on the Google Play Store. In addition, 49% of people open an app 11 or more times each day. And 69% of all US digital media time comes from mobile apps. So obviously, smartphones are here to stay, and mobile apps go right along with that. Now, a lot of people argue, well, I still use computers. And yes, that's true. We all use computers. But if you look at this graph, you'll notice that the amount of people accessing the internet through a computer has continued to decline while mobile continues to rise. So mobile apps for business. All right, this is all great. Most of us on here have smartphones, use apps. But what about for businesses? Well, your audience is already there and they are looking for solutions. So if your audience is a mobile phone user and they're out there looking for apps, let's say your end clients, your app is a way to expand your market to new customers. Users can use apps on the go with minimal signal. So if I am, let's say, in the car and I am looking for an oil delivery, for example, if I'm able to sign in on a website, it takes a lot more time than if I have an app that I'm already signed into. It also doesn't require as much data. The other thing is for employees. So we have seen an increase dramatically in companies developing internal mobile apps for their employees. You can restrict access to these. And a lot of workers are no longer really tied to their computers to do their jobs. This is especially important as we're beginning to go back on site to customers or for field workers who are doing services outdoors during the day. Being able to use their phones is going to save them considerable time. And part of that is because they can collect data in real time. So you'll see this a lot in the insurance industry, in repairs, in appraisals, in home inspections. People who have to take a lot of pictures, it's so much more convenient to open an app and take those pictures directly into the app. It's also a much more accurate way to get data by putting down measurements live while on the site, rather than writing them paper and pen, handed them off to someone else who then types them into a system, or waiting till you get back to the office to enter all of this data. It's just a lot more efficient. Customers expect convenience. We live in the fast food world of drive-throughs and microwaves where people they expect the convenience. And for certain situations, an app might prove very convenient versus the traditional laptop-based application. Another thing to keep in mind, I personally don't even have a phone book in my house anymore. When I am looking for a particular need, say a plumber, I actually would go in through my phone and look at either websites or in maps to see which is close to me. If you do have an app, you can direct mobile users to that app, and it might be beneficial for them. And then the final point, your competition has them already. A lot of large companies have invested heavily in mobile apps for either internal or external use. So you want to be able to compete with that. All right. So now that we kind of have established why you might need a mobile app, what kind of app do you actually need? There's a lot of words that you'll hear thrown around about different application types. The first one is mobile versus web. That's kind of the focus of what we've covered so far. Typically, a web application is something that runs in a web browser, and a mobile app is something that would run on a phone. The other important distinction is social versus business. Typically, if you're going to make a social app, it's better just to use what's already there. For business, you might need something a little more specific. Public versus private. A lot of people don't realize this, but you can create private applications that are published to the phone store for your employees. You just have restricted access. Out of box versus custom. I'm going to go over this a little bit more because I think it's really important to note. Out of box is an application that you can download that already exists. Custom is something that you have built yourself. Native versus hybrid. This is another important distinction that we're going to spend a little bit of time on today. So out-of-box applications. This is something like Microsoft Office, Google Apps, Outlook, CRMs, a lot of these applications that already exist. You're able to customize them a little bit, but in general, you're just downloading, buying a license or subscription, and then using them. So the obvious pro here is that they're a lot less expensive. And that's because really you're just paying subscription costs for something that's already built. They're quicker to get going. They already have the framework to provide insight. So if you're using a CRM, for example, you might see different areas in there that you wouldn't have thought to create yourself, but you'll end up using because they're already in the system. They are well tested. When I think of well tested, I think of something like QuickBooks, right? Tons and tons of users already on it. So it's smarter just to use that. It's built out, it's developed, and it has the tools that you need. The other neat thing that we're seeing a lot of in mobile applications is there's companies out there that make sort of like a template. You can go to those firms and they will actually white label the application with your business's logo and publish it under your business's name. So it's sort of a quicker way to get a custom app functionality without the cost. There are some negatives to this, however, which might result in you choosing to go more in the custom route. The first thing is that they do have recurring cost, and the subscription cost can change over time. There's also a lack of control over changes. So if you are using an out-of-box application and the provider of that makes a change, you might not be aware of it and it could disrupt your flow of business. Similarly, they could update it at any time. They're not required to tell you before they make an update. The other important thing to note is security considerations. They might not be up to par for what your company needs. This is especially true in heavily regulated industries like healthcare and manufacturing. Additionally, they might not have all the features you need, and you're not able really to request or add features in many cases. And of course, if it's easy for you to get, your competitors are also having a very easy time getting it as well. Custom, on the other hand, the pro here is really that it's customized to you. So you get exactly what you want, and it's going to be tailored to your business needs. And the benefit here, the big one, is that it is proprietary. So it's kind of like increasing the value of your business. And sometimes you can make it very hard to copy on the back end and actually patent some of what you're doing with the logic. Additionally, it's going to be on your environment, which means that you have control over security, updates. You also have control over costing changes. The con here is you need to have a clear idea of what you want. So if you don't know what you want, custom is probably not the route for you. It also takes a lot of time to develop, to update, and is much more expensive. But if you do it correctly, the ongoing costs can be fairly low. Does anyone have any questions on this before we move on? All right, silence is acceptance. So types of mobile applications. There are a couple challenges for phone apps that we're going to go over quickly here, and then I'll talk about hold on, I just lost my thing. There are many types of phone apps, and there are many types of phones. This can be a challenge when you're building a phone app. Android and iOS also have very different operating systems. So think of it kind of like Windows and Mac, very different. Publishing to Google Play and Apple App Store are completely separate processes, and that can be frustrating for some people. And in the past, what could happen is you would end up with several different code bases.
Yeah, I think we're going to cover some more detail on the publishing of the app stores later, are we?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
because that is a big topic we all talk about a lot. Sorry.
Yes. So the publishing is one of the main pain points. We're definitely going to touch on that. The first thing to ask yourself before you go down the mobile app trail, do you actually need a mobile app? For some businesses, it's a definite no. Some businesses are able to do just as well with a responsive website, which is built for mobile users. If what your users are looking for isn't that complex and you have a lot of one-time users, a website might be the best way for you. It's lower cost and they can access it from a browser. Where you get into applications is if you have a lot of recurring users or you want it to be more private, you want to kind of move that in a mobile direction. So native applications, they're really designed for the specific device. This is a style of development. And typically you'll see this style used when you're only deploying to iOS or Android. So for example, if I'm building for iPhones only, I'm not going to take the time to build for Android. And these apps take best advantages of the platform. Part of the advantage here is that you can actually go into like different community repositories or resources and really tailor your app to use like an Android device. If you're trying to build something for Mac or Windows, it's also a great way to approach it. So some of the features you can take advantage of with a native application that might steer you in this direction are things like geolocation, camera, metrics, if you want to access someone's contacts or SMS. Hybrid, on the other hand, is a totally different development approach. Basically, you're building the app one time and deploying it to a multitude of devices. So this works on both iOS and Android. And this is the approach we typically recommend to our clients because most of them do have split usership. The nice thing to do a hybrid is you're only building it once, and you also only have to maintain one code base. These phones do change their operating systems all the time, and you do have to update apps. So building this way can save you some effort. So which one's right for you? This chart just kind of breaks down a lot of what I've already spoken up to. Green are the positive attributes. So you can see that for things like the code base, the development time, cost, and navigating the App Store, hybrid is the clear front runner for those items, and the other two not quite as good. However, if you're looking at intense performance, you want the highest possible speed, and you want the sharpest UI UX, you might want to look into native as well as hybrid. So one of the hybrid tools that we've started working with that we've been really impressed by is the Ionic framework. This tool, first of all, is open source, so it's free. It is one of the fastest hybrid tools that we have worked with. And it also allows you to kind of pick your language, so you can kind of pair it with whatever other development tools that you would like. And it just seems to have a very clean deployment to multiple devices. So here's a couple of the other things you want to look at when you're building an app. Is it easy to use? This is so important. Nobody likes an app that's frustrating. You know, I always say if an app developer does their job well, you don't hear anything. If anything is wrong, you will hear about it a lot. And I think that's especially true with mobile apps because it's already on your phone and nobody wants it to look like their phone's not working. So it's really important to design for specific user groups. If you know the demographics and the style of users, you kind of want to design with those people in mind. Also, to think about the device it's going to be used on. For example, if you're making something that's both for phones and tablets, you kind of want to look at both because there's going to be some differences in how they're used. You want to make sure the text is clear, easy to read. You also want to make sure that it's quick to use, so I know exactly where I'm headed inside of the app. And you want those fast load times so that people don't feel like it's not working. Accessibility. So accessibility is kind of a hot topic right now. I see this as a key component of inclusion and kind of what we're striving to do at SphereGen. So ADA compliance, of course, needs to be accessible. It also has to be accessible for different ages and also different levels of technology friendliness. Especially if you're putting this out to customers, you want to make it as accessible as possible. You kind of think as well if you want people to access it from both phones and computers. And different reasons for that might be like their comfort level and their ability to navigate the application. And then you also got to play into security. Unfortunately, it's always a consideration. You never want a totally open application, but then you want to make it not too secure so that no one can get in, because that doesn't work either. Testing. So testing is something that I see as really a key element of application development, especially for mobile apps. You know, we keep a ratio of 30% project time. So 30% of the time, if you're developing, you want to keep that ratio. That is a lot of testing. So for example, if we are developing for 8 weeks, we then would want to make sure we're testing for like around 3 weeks afterwards or throughout. Test cases are written during the design phase. So when you first start building the app, you already know how you're going to be testing it. You test concurrently with each sprint. Now, what this means is that, say we're developing page 1 of the application. Once page 1 is done, the development team actually moves on to page 2 and starts developing that. As soon as they move, the testing team moves in to test page 1. And that way you don't get too far ahead on the application and realize, oh, we actually had an error on page 1, so we have to redo page 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it also just keeps the quality high of what you're doing. There's a couple types of testing that you'll hear thrown around. QA testing is one that you'll hear a lot. This is usually done by the development company to make sure that the quality is where they want it to be. The other key one you'll hear about is UAT, or user acceptance testing. And this is when you would actually have users, like beta users, on the application. You'll also do things like testing scripts. This is like when you would automate your testing as much as possible. And you'll have testing groups as well. So for example, the one I'm about to show you, there's 3 different types of users, and they had to find testers for each of those user types. And that's a really important piece because you don't want to leave any groups out, because then when your application goes live, you're going to run into some funny things. So you're going to move on now to talk about our case study on Celebrity Shuttle. This is one of our clients located right here in Connecticut. Very exciting application that we've been working with them on.
Amy, we covered a lot in that this first half hour. Is there any should we ask for any questions?
Yeah, go ahead. Does anyone
Do you
have any questions, or is there anything in the chat?
Guess not. Sorry, check.
No, it's good to check in. Yeah, absolutely. And if you do have a question, feel free to either unmute yourself or put the question in the chat at any point. And we'll also do some Q&A at the end as well, because maybe people are saving their questions for the end. So Celebrity Shuttle, like most good business applications, is born out of a problem. And the main problem is that Celebrity Shuttle, they had their other branch, Celebrity Home Healthcare, which is getting a ton of requests for transportation. And there's a lot of reasons for this. The first main reason that I just want to touch on is that the popular ride-sharing apps that most of us use, they're not senior friendly. They're not accessible. Unfortunately, like some of our clients that are now using Celebrity Shuttle had actually been banned from some of the main ride-sharing apps. And this is for a variety of reasons. Honestly, the main reason is disabilities. And so that's something that just was a very big pain point and just didn't seem quite right. So we wanted to make sure they had an alternative. There is state-provided transportation that a lot of seniors can use. However, there's a lot of restrictions on it. For example, what time you can get it, how many miles you have to go, and how you have to pay for it. And so, like, a lot of them use their insurance or Medicare to pay for it. And so for some people, it wasn't the best fit. There's also a higher need for seniors that wanted help to get in and out of the vehicle or in and out of their house. If you're using one of the main rideshare apps, they're not going to come to your front door and like help you out of the house and make sure that you get to the vehicle safely. And there's also a requirement for handicapped accessible vehicles. Unfortunately, most of ride sharing and or taxi services, it can be a challenge to find good handicapped vehicles. And if they send the wrong vehicle by accident, you're not able to make it to where you need to go. And then, of course, last year hit when we were starting this project. And we then realized, oh, all these seniors are in quarantine. And we needed to add delivery and also really safe transportation. So the concept behind this was to ensure ride sharing for everyone, including those who need full-time care or assistance. So part of that was making sure that all the drivers were licensed CNAs. And this way, you know, you could have the same person doing your home care or helping you with something that is actually your driver. It seems simple, but a lot of people aren't offering that. And we saw it as a big need. There's also like the accessibility piece with the types of vehicles they're using and the ability to provide independence for seniors who want to live in their own homes. And then, of course, because of 2020, we started offering delivery services for medication, groceries, and household supplies. So seniors could request a delivery if they are uncomfortable leaving their home. And delivery rates were much lower than the traditional charges. And that is because of the nature of the business, because you're booking your same house home care individual to do a delivery for you.
So this application does a lot of different things, right, Amy?
Yes, it does.
And is it all within one app, or is it multiple apps that do all these things?
So that's a great point. This is actually all housed within one application. And I think that's kind of like the competitive edge that Celebrity Shuttle has at the moment. You're not using separate apps for each piece of this. It's all in one.
And did they do everything right up front, or was this over phased process?
Yeah, so this was a really phased process. So we've done like 3 or 4 phases of different development with them. And the reason for that is like you want to do kind of a gradual rollout so that the users can kind of guide you to what else they would like the app to contain. For example, we found out a lot of people didn't want the delivery services, so we built out more of that functionality. Great questions.
Amy, I just want to make sure too. Can you just double check? I can't seem to unmute the chat, and it looks like it might be muted.
It shouldn't be.
Oh, there we go. It is unmuted now.
Okay, cool. All right, is there any comments in the chat, Anthony?
There is not right now.
Yeah, Anthony is my chat watcher for the day, so thank you for that. So the app solution. This is kind of how we designed it. We looked at what the features were that they needed. So flexible, because there's frequent changes happening in the landscape. They need to make changes easily, easy for seniors to access. There is medical information in this app. So we had to make sure there was the appropriate level of encryption and security. We also needed easy payment. At this time, there was a ban on cash for this types of transactions. We need to utilize the matching logic to reduce steps for scheduling. We also recently worked on adding location and time tracking and text messages as well. So knowing these are the features, we actually went and took the feature list and used that to choose the technology to achieve those features. This is a mix of paid and open source tools. So Azure, for example, that is where it's hosted. And there are plenty of tools within Azure. The Ionic framework is something I've already kind of discussed. That is open source, so that is completely free. Stripe, which is what we use to do the payment, you do have to pay for, but it's kind of a nominal fee. And then Google Maps is something we just added. And basically, we're using the Google Maps API to kind of integrate in the location tracking for users. Additionally, we added the text notification option. So if people didn't want to have notifications coming from the apps or didn't want to call, we kind of let them choose. They can get a call or a text. And additionally, of course, we used Ionic. All right, so now we're actually going to get to see part of this app. As I mentioned, there is medical information, so we're only able to see certain areas, but you're going to get to see those today. So there's 3 user groups. The first user is seniors. That's kind of the main client of the app that the app is really focused on. So seniors, they really needed to have their personal information saved, so they wouldn't have to put it in every time. They needed the simplest login possible and the ability to really request whatever they needed from inside the app. So the first piece we built out for them was the registration piece. When you first open the application, you're able to hit register. This is essentially the length of the screen. It's pretty short. We tried to make it as simple as possible. Admins can also add or remove users as needed, and that was a key functionality as well. You can register as a driver, so the screen is the same as for drivers and seniors. Since there is medical information, we had to create a login system. For this login, we found that it was easier for this demographic to have them use phone numbers as their login. That way you wouldn't have to remember a username. I think that just really helps because most people remember their own phone number. I can never remember my username for any application that I'm on. So I think this is a great feature. And again, accessibility, right? So this is the main screen I would see when I first log in the app. You'll notice right there at the top, I have the icons. These are pretty large. I'm able just to pick the icon that I want and then request whatever it is that I want of those 4 categories. So we tried to keep it super simple. So if I clicked on a ride, for example, I would see this screen that says pick up. There is availability to use frequent locations. So you can kind of save some of your locations in here, like your home address or frequent places that you go. So in that case, you're really just putting in the need, your communication preference, the date and time, and the actual locations that you want. So this has made it much simpler. Just to clarify, before they had this app, people would call into the senior facility, and they would answer, and then they would say, okay, I need a ride at this time to this place. You hope that everything is correct, that the person on the phone is hearing. Then the person on the phone would have to call a driver to try to get someone to schedule. And then they would have to call back the client to confirm yes and confirm that the address is correct again. As you can imagine, that process was much more time consuming than this simple screen. So the driver is essentially a lot of the same screens I just showed you. The only difference is that they're able to accept a ride when it's assigned. And to become a driver, the admin has to approve you to make sure you're a valid CNA and get all of your documentation as an employee. For the administrator, so originally we weren't really sure how much admin was needed. As we started working on this application, and it's been a couple phases now, the admin capabilities continue to grow. So, originally the admin was just a mobile app. So the admin was able to sign in with special credentials into the main application, the same one. And they were able to go in there and do things like create a user, add a user, delete a user. They're able to certify a driver that they've gotten all their paperwork in and they've met them. They were able to view reports to see if the rides were completed and if the people getting the rides were happy with them. They were able to match seniors to drivers. So, sometimes they have a senior that really likes a certain driver. They'll make sure that person gets that driver every time. And they were also able to add services. So because of everything going on the last year and a half, this was really crucial because we discovered, okay, there's just continual change. So you need a ride to this type of appointment, or you might need medication delivered to your house. And that just continues to evolve. Now we're rolling out a new module, so I'm giving you guys a sneak preview of it today. I just have a little video playthrough. So we are adding restaurant delivery to this application. And basically what we ended up doing is, because the mobile app for the admin, while it worked great, there were certain things that just weren't going to work on it, especially for the restaurant module. And so we actually built out a web app. So I'm going to show you that, and you can kind of see how this is different than mobile applications. Oh, come on. So this is where you could actually add food categories. And this is a way to add to the restaurants. So you can go in here and edit the name of the category. This is all test data, by the way, because we're not going to show you the real restaurants information. This is rolling out right now. We're super excited about this. And you're able to go in here and add any food categories that you want or edit them. And then this goes into the actual mobile app that the end user will see. So when I go into the mobile app and I'm looking for, let's say, pasta, I can sort on that in the mobile application. And this admin portal allows me to control those categories that people can sort on. And so this is going to allow them to really grow the application and add a lot of new restaurants. So it's just a quick way to make changes. And we chose the web for this because it was just too hard to do on a phone. These are the rates. These are not real rates. Please note that. These are test rates that are completely made up. So you'll see that we have different rates for different categories, and you're able to actually edit or add these rates. So if we see that there's a lot of demand for one thing, you're able to go in and add that. And as you just noted, the menu also is able to move away to the side, or you can leave that open. All right, so that's a quick demo of that. So that kind of gives you a feel of how a web app might be different. This really would not work well on a phone because the screens are so long, and also because of all of these categories of data. Once he gets tons of restaurants in here, you're going to have a lot of challenges managing that through a mobile application. It's just going to be too much data to manage. And this is also a great example of web and mobile working together, which is something that we end up using a lot for our applications. Any questions before I move on?
Amy, there was a question in chat.
Great.
And Reed had asked, can you discuss any of the information on the costs associated with mobile app development, such as the example that you gave earlier?
Yes, so cost for mobile application. So if you are doing like an out-of-box application, that is much lower cost. You're just looking at the subscription fees and then any price to modify. For this actual app, the cost did get higher as we went on. You'll notice that we used a lot of tools. So that's one way to keep the cost down. But mobile apps, you'll see a pretty wide range of cost. You're definitely looking in the thousands, all the way up to, $1 million, unfortunately, for people who really go all out on their application. So it's a very broad range. But generally, what you want to look at when we're doing costing is how much time is the developer spending and how many people are on the development team. And that depends on how complex your app is. So if you have a really simple application, pretty low cost, but as you continue to add features, the cost will continue to go up. But that's a great question. All right, I think we're going to move on to the results. So I wanted to share kind of how this has gone for Celebrity Shuttle. So this is a review that the application received on the mobile store. And this is pretty typical. The people who use this app seem to really like it just because it's one application, like I said. You can order a nurse to go and stay with your parent for the day if you're busy that day and they needed help with something. You can get takeout. You can get a ride to the doctor. One of our first users was someone who they just needed a ride for 2 blocks both ways. And because of that, all the other ride-sharing apps were telling them, no, it wasn't far enough. But this person had a disability and they could not make it without a ride. So that's a great example of how this app's being used and how it's really expanded our client's business significantly. So here are the business results. I'm going to break these down for you. These are current as of today. This app is going to continue to grow because we're just seeing a huge amount of growth with it. So business revenue has doubled in the last 9 months. They're able to take a lot more rides. They're able to have more drivers and more riders because they've simplified the path of ordering a ride. They also were able to add more geographic service areas. And as a result, ridership increased by 500%. The scheduling coordination is completely streamlined now. All the workers there are way happier, not having to do the multiple phone calls back and forth and not having any mistakes with addresses or phone numbers or anything like that. They have the good security that they needed as well. So that's been really exciting to see that develop out. And additionally, they were featured in a panel by New Haven Chamber. They also were included in our Microsoft nomination for diversity and inclusion for Partner of the Year. So those are pretty great results. So now you're thinking, maybe I need a mobile app. I'm going to go over kind of things that our clients often tell us they wish they knew. Unfortunately, we are not always the first developer on a project. Quite often people come to us after a failure, and that is okay. But I wanted to get this information out there so people kind of know where some of the trouble spots might lie for you. So I'll give you an example. We had someone come to us just last year, and this individual had listed for app development on Craigslist, and they found somebody who built their app for them. It was a one-person development firm, and they built the app very quickly at a very low cost. And then they essentially locked her out of her application. What they'll do is sometimes you'll have situations where people will charge you an upfront really low cost, and then they will take away your access and ask you for a significant amount of funds. And that is always a sad thing to see. So in that circumstance, she had an incredibly challenging time trying to get her control of her application back. So you do see situations like that. I just wanted to point out a couple things you can do to feel out if stuff like that is going to happen to you. So here's some questions, kind of what you should ask a developer, and I'll go over what answers you want to see and what red flags there are for these questions. So what is the design process like? You know, some clients come to us and they have already created all of these designs. That's fine, but just know that your developer is going to suggest changes. How collaborative is the development process? By this, I'm talking about, you know, how involved is the client in the development process? Is it they just give you the idea and then you work independently and then come back and say, here's your app? When will I see mock-ups? What is the project plan? How much testing do you do? How often are meetings? Do you use a project manager? How do you determine cost? So that's something we already kind of addressed, but I'm going to go over that again. And then, of course, app support and publishing, key things to note. Here are the answers you should want to see. And these are answers, of course, they align with what we give, but it's also kind of the industry standard. You want to see a lot of collaboration. So both with the designs and the development, you want to hear that they're going to be a partner with you and really help you build out what your vision is. You want to see mock-ups within the first 2 weeks. Can't say how crucial that is. If it's too much longer than that, how do you know you're headed in the right direction? It's kind of can create a lot of vagueness. You want to see a project plan as soon as possible, either before you sign or immediately after. I wouldn't sign anything without knowing sort of the length of the project and at least how many people are on it, because otherwise you might end up in a bad situation. Again, 30% testing to development is the key ratio you're looking for. If someone says, oh, you don't really need testing, that's definitely something you don't want to hear.
Big red flags there. Big red flags. Yeah.
And we have heard that before. I'm sure Jen remembers. There are clients who will come to you and say, oh, but I don't want to pay for testing. And we're like, then you're throwing your money away. Don't even build.
Yes.
You want to be meeting at least once a week or every 2 weeks, depending on how big your project is. That's really key. You don't want to be like, oh, we'll talk to you in 3 months when you're done. That's the worst case scenario. You want to have a project manager. I mean, we have great ones at SphereGen. And it's really important because that person's going to coordinate all the efforts for the team. Again, to determine cost, you want to hear things like, well, this is the team size. This is the size and complexity of the project. The length of the project is this. This is how much it costs per a module. Those are kind of the things you want to hear. And you want to make sure there's a support plan. Don't just do a one and done and not have a plan of how you're going to support the app, because as we've learned, stores like the iOS store and the Google Play store make changes all the time. Just a quick note on publishing. If you've never published an app before, you're not going to have fun. It's going to be horrible, but you only have to do it one time. So once you are in the App Store as a publisher, you can put out as many apps as you want or make any updates you want. Another key thing is that you want to make sure your development company has a plan for this. Be upfront. Are you responsible to set up your publishing, or are they going to help you, or are they doing it all for you? I've seen a variety of styles of this. I'm not convinced any of them are really better than the other. It just depends on the situation. And you're going to need a Dun & Bradstreet number and a state-issued ID. So that's really important. So if you're a nonprofit, you might not have one yet. You want to apply for one or make sure you have the ability to get one. They don't take any other ID numbers besides Dun & Bradstreet. And you also want to make sure it's the business owner or the admin of the business, someone higher up, that is applying for your Apple ID.
And that was one of the biggest delays. I'm sorry. That was one of the biggest delays in all of our projects was the Dun & Bradstreet number.
Yes.
It's a big issue that people don't realize. You have to have that certification. Apple will not accept anything.
Yeah. And typically, just so everyone's aware, to get into the store, like it can go really quick occasionally. So you'll hear sometimes people, it only takes like 2 weeks is quick. I have had clients take over 3 months to get approved by Apple. So it's definitely something you want to start right away if you are going to publish an application. Here's the other red flags. We've talked about most of these, but one that I want to mention, sometimes you'll hear something like, oh, well, we have done apps, but we just can't show them to you. Well, if they do mobile apps, you should be able to find one and download it. So that is a big red flag. Sometimes people are not being completely honest or transparent about their level of experience. Another thing is the developer shouldn't be the one owning your app. You want to make sure you have access to every part of it. That way, if something goes awry or your developer shuts down or you lose the ability to contact them, you want to be able to have that all backed up. You also don't ever do a project without a contract. I think that's just good in general. It helps the developer too because they know what you expect from the beginning and they have that all in writing. Another thing, the best development teams are great listeners. They are going to take your ideas and your vision, they're going to get excited about it, and they're going to run with it with enthusiasm. So if you see somebody who's not like that, just know those people are out there that are going to be excited about what your vision is and what your ideas are. And you want to make sure they're going to answer any questions that you have. If you get any pushback, just don't go down the road with them. And that is all for our presentation.